I think the biggest difficulty in change is making a different choice. Now think about the New Year's resolutions. Everybody's very clear about what their intention is, what they want, whatever that is. But if you keep making the same choices, you're going to keep doing the same things. You're going to keep creating the same experiences. You're going to keep feeling the same emotions. And your biology and your neurocircuitry and your chemistry and your hormones and even your gene expression is going to stay the same because you're the same. But keep thinking the same way, keep acting the same way, keep feeling the same way, and do it over and over again. Those circuits in the brain ultimately become hardwired. And the emotions that are a response to someone or something, even your own thoughts, get conditioned subconsciously as a program into the body. So 95% of who we are by the middle of our life is an unconscious set of thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that are automatically programmed into our biology. So the first step to change is not thinking positively. You got to become conscious of those unconscious thoughts when you decide to make a different choice and it doesn't feel familiar. The thought that says, start tomorrow, it's too hard, just do it anyway, go ahead and make that choice, do the same thing. You're not good enough, you'll never change, you're too much like your parents, I failed last time. You have to be able to become so conscious of those unconscious thoughts that you would never go unconscious to that thought ever again, and that's change. You'd have to catch yourself, how you speak and how you act. If you want to be happy and you're blaming and you're complaining and you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're judging everyone, those behaviors are not going to make you happy. They're actually going to make you unhappy. So you got to become so conscious of those unconscious habituations that you wouldn't go unconscious and behave that way. And then, of course, you got to look at those emotions that are pretty much chemical residue from the past, and decide, does this lack, does this suffering, does this pain belong in my future? And that process of becoming so conscious that we don't go unconscious is the process of change. And how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change. So the hard part about change is when you decide to make a different choice, get ready. It's going to feel uncomfortable. There's going to be uncertainty. You're not going to be able to predict the next moment. It's going to feel unfamiliar. So if the body has been conditioned to be the mind, then the servant is the master. So the body starts sending information back to the brain to think a certain thought so that you make the same choice, that you do the same thing, you create the same experience.
Comfortable, this is familiar.
Get back to the same feeling of suffering. That feels so much better than the uncertainty of the unknown. So going from the old self to the new self and crossing that river literally is a neurological, it's a biological, it's a chemical, it's a hormonal, it's a genetic death of the old self. That's the phoenix lighting itself on fire. And most people would rather cling to that familiar place than take a chance and possibility. That void, that vacuum actually is the perfect place to create it. And we discovered this, that the brain changes the most when you get to that point where you think you can't go any further and you want to quit. If you go past that point, that is the unknown. Now, the unknown has always been wired in our biology, that the uncertainty of the unknown is always a scary place. Is that a tiger in the bushes, or is that just a shadow? So the unknown becomes a very scary place when we're living in survival. So most people never take that chance and possibility. But if a person's actually taught how to execute in the unknown, and there's nothing scary there, and they can apply the same principle and say, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? And a belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over again. So what is the voice in my head that I want to program my brain into thinking and believing? What behaviors am I going to demonstrate in my life if I'm going to not behave this way around this person or around this circumstance and I want to behave a different way? Let me rehearse in my mind, close my eyes, and get really clear on how I'm going to respond or behave in this circumstance. And the act of mental rehearsal literally grows circuits in the brain. Now your brain's looking like you've already done it. Your brain is no longer a record of the past. It's being conditioned and mapped into the future. So now you have the circuitry in place. If you keep practicing that, the hardware becomes more automatic. It becomes more of a software program, and you start behaving that way. And then the biggest challenge then is, okay, if I'm not going to feel suffering, and I'm not going to feel pain, and I'm not going to feel judgment, but I want to feel grateful for my life, can I teach my body emotionally what my future will feel like before it happens. So once you start conditioning your body to an elevated emotion, we tend to see that the heart-centered emotions tend to be the ones that produce the most dramatic changes in our biology. And the body's so objective, it really doesn't know the difference between the real-life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone. And the body starts getting lifted in a lot of ways. So keep thinking differently, keep acting differently, keep feeling differently. That's your personality. Then your personal reality begins to change. And with people who cross that river, there's new opportunities, there's new experiences, there's new events that take place in their life. So that's what we teach.
So is the issue that people, when they want change, they don't change deeply enough? They're just looking at, well, if I do this particular new physical habit, that will be able to change things, but the underlying currents that are driving that behavior are always going to come in and then take over, despite the fact that you don't want to eat sugar anymore, or you want to be more polite with your partner, or you want to be more... It's too surface level with a lot of the change that tries to be attempted.
Yeah, I think that people, unfortunately, have to get knocked to our lowest level sometimes, where you're no longer inside the jar. When you're inside the jar, you can't read the label. You got to get so uncomfortable that you could actually see yourself, right? And so that tragedy, that crisis, that disease, the diagnosis, the loss, it's got to be so severe that you finally look at yourself and say, maybe it's me. Oh my God, could it possibly be me? But you're looking at yourself kind of through the eyes of someone else because you don't feel like you in that moment. You're so uncomfortable that you can see yourself. That concept is called metacognition, right? So a lot of times people wait for that crisis or the diagnosis or the betrayal to go, oh my God, I got to really change because I'm really unhappy, or I can't blame that person or my past or my circumstance because and nothing's working here. I got to really start making those changes. So when they see themselves separate from their program, they're becoming conscious of their unconscious self. That is the first step to change. Now, I say you can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, which most people like to do, or you can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration, right? So could you be defined by a vision of the future? And could you get up from your morning practice, actually believing in your future more than you're believing in your past? So from that elevated state where you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, from an elevated state, instead of a self-limiting state, you can be conscious of that old self as well. And so I think, God, what a great time in history to be alive, because this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is really a time in history to know how. And I've been at this long enough to know that 20 years ago, people didn't hear it like they hear it now. The information is readily available, and people are realizing, kind of, if I have this dream, if I have this goal, how bad do I want it? And if they really want it, and we've all done this, you sit down and you say, what would it be like to be super healthy, super wealthy, super in love, super mystical, transcendental, whatever it is? Like, you ask that question and your brain gets really creative. It starts combining circuits in new ways, and you start getting this vision of the future, this possibility that you actually put yourself in this future reality. It becomes so real that you start to feel the emotion as if you were actually there. And so that moment when you come out of your resting state, the stronger the emotion you feel when you hold that vision, the more you'll remember that vision. That's creating a memory. So the person comes out of their resting state and they make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that causes their body to respond to their mind. That their choice that they're making in that moment becomes a moment in time that they would never forget. They'll say to you, I remember the moment I made up my mind to change. I was in this place. I was with these people. I was this particular time. That the event is a long-term memory. And they've come out of the resting state. And we could say then they're giving their body a taste of the future emotionally, and somehow they begin to embody whatever that future is, and now they begin to move in a different direction. And so they start trusting in their future more because they feel like they're connected to it. So then the person who's really interested in making a change would have to come to that same state again in order to produce the same effect. If they say, I don't feel like it, or I want to be nicer, or whatever, and there's nothing really at stake. Intention is really meaning. You got to have a meaning behind what you're doing. So people who now say, I want a better life, I can't have a better life unless I change. And when I change, my life will change. Now you're not so interested in what's happening out there. You're more interested in what's going on inside of you.
What's happening, people? Thank you very much for watching the animation. I adore After School. I think Mark is unbelievably talented, as I'm sure that you agree. And if you want to watch the full episode with Joe in all of its glory, it's available, linked in the description below or in the comments. All right. Big love.